Yes.
come into existence, or the Enterprise would be hurled light years off into space. Now that's omnipotent.
Yes, it is.
That is omnipotent. Um,
That is my
but when you,
favorite character other than Jean-Luc Picard of any of the new Star Treks.
yeah,
So,
he is totally my favorite character. But when we read the stories from myth or even well, from myth, because we don't find this narrative per se in biblical stories, is God gets around on a fiery chariot or on a horse-drawn chariot or on a silver shield, or on a vimana. You know, God can't just snap his fingers and make all of his enemies go away. He has to have weapons that are made by this other group of gods, that they can use to vanquish them.
pretty astounding weaponry.
It's pretty astounding weaponry. And if we look at it from a contemporary point of view, we can kind of understand the weaponry, although we haven't necessarily recreated it, because we don't really know exactly what it is. But I think if we knew what it was, we could probably recreate it today. But if you're omnipotent, why do you need a weapon? Why do you need a chariot? Why do you need a device to transform your appearance? I mean, you wouldn't need that
Absolutely
because
not.
you're omnipotent. But that's not, and so all of the gods we find in these stories, act more human-like. But then there's the next line that you usually get is, well, but people made them up. And it's like, I can't imagine individuals that maybe their best piece of technology is a bow and an arrow. And that's kind of maybe because bows and arrows didn't come into use until about 14,000 BC. And I think these stories greatly precede that.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Where would they come up with these concepts of these flying machines or, lightning emitting weapons? I mean, like Zeus had, his weapon is the lightning bolt.
Lightning bolt. Yes, slinging lightning bolts. Well,
Correct.
then you have Thor with the hammer.
This is correct, but well, let me just kind of take this in a different way for a second.
Okay.
So in India, Indra, who is the sky god there, so Zeus, sky god in Greek cosmology, Indra, sky god in Indian cosmology, carries a Vajra, and many times it's shown as a three-pronged weapon that, emitted lightning. Now, get out of town. And when you see images of it and you start looking at other pictures, you see images of Zeus carrying this three-pronged weapon that looks a whole lot like Indra's weapon.
Yes,
and you see an image of Marduk also carrying this three-pronged weapon that he used to annihilate Tiamat. And then if you come into the Americas, you have Talok, who it's not a three-pronged weapon, but looks a little bit more like a club. But depending on other images that you see maybe of Zeus, instead of looking like this three-pronged thing, it might look like a club. So there are variations of imagery, but it still emits lightning. So Talok's, thing still emits lightning. But that's in the Americas. Oh, wait, and Talok's a sky god. And the same.
He's there.
And the same thing with Thor. So we have this lightning emitting weapon, or we have this weapon that's carried by a sky god, and sometimes it's identified as being a club or a hammer. And so we have Zeus or Thor with his hammer. So we find these parallels all over the earth, which again adds to the concept that we have a global narrative And in my opinion, we're talking about a finite group of gods or a finite structure within a organization. Because many people believe that the names that we have for many of these gods are not necessarily like Frank or Joe, but more like Earth Goddess, Sky Father. So they're more their titles. So the individual might change, but the title stays the same.
Well, where did they go? Why?
Well,
the Greeks still had them. The Romans still had them. But they're not considered even close to a reality now by the average bear.
Well, that's in my humble opinion. When I was writing the E.T. Chronicles man-made book, and I mean, just sitting down to write it, and trying to figure out how I was trying to figure out how to organize it. And one decision I had to make early on was that I had to accept the fact that this book was going to talk about extraterrestrials, even though I think I used the word extraterrestrial in the book once and refer to these individuals as gods because that's how myth reports them.
Yes.
And then the other concession that I had to make was that I was not writing the book for everyone on the planet, that I was writing this book for people in the Western world. Because when you step out of cultures that were not influenced by Abrahamic traditions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you find that they all believe in a pantheon of gods, and in many of them, they believe that these gods came from the sky.
Yes.
And so why do I need to write a book and try to explain this concept to people in India when they already believed it? And so then it took me down, I'll use your word, the rabbit hole of
it's a very good word.
Oh, I know. And I've used it in the book, of how we ended up getting brainwashed. Because really in the West, there's one book, it's the Bible. And anything that is outside of those four corners is imagination. And so we have been taught, this is my new commentary. This is like, has only really come up in the last month or so. But who is it? And I would love to figure out who this person was, but I doubt I'll ever identify it. But who is it that came up with the conclusion that mythology was flights of fantasy, describing weather patterns, or describing universal archetypes? Who is it that took the stories that come from our mythic record and said that they're a bunch of hogwash talking about things that aren't real?
My guess would be someone in the Vatican.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not quite sure how far that goes back. I mean, because if you think about it, like in Ireland, for example, they still believed in the fairy folk and the wee people.
There's a vast number of people in the U.S. who do.
But I'm talking about more, further back in time. And I mean, today, I think people have broken out of that box. But, but I think it's just sad that, in writing the Stepping Out of Eden book, one of the things that I discovered that I did not know in all of my research, even as a kid, was that the number of archaeological remains, so of bones and whatever, that they have used to identify, the evolution of humanity from Australopithecus to Homo habilis to Homo neanderthalis, I joke around and say you could put it inside a cardboard box. I mean, there's really not that much. There's a jawbone, there's a leg bone, there's a piece of a cranium, and they have come up with these theories.
But they don't present them as theories. They present them as fact, absolute fact.
Well, yeah. Okay,
right?
So they come up with these facts based on I mean, I was doing this research about the evolution of our ability to walk upright.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, so the earliest one they thought was like 600, and I'm just kind of making this number up, but like 600 million years old, 6 million years old, 6 million. And the theory came forward because of a thigh bone and the way that they saw that the muscles attached to the thigh bone. And based on that, they made an early conclusion that this primate or early hominid could walk upright on one freaking thigh bone. I'm like, seriously? A thigh bone?
Well, and I understood when in your writing you were discussing the placement for the spine and the skull.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not. The thigh bone blows my mind, because who does that? If you took that on any other topic, that level of evidence into anything else, you would be ridiculed and lose your tenure.
But you see it all the time.
You do
coming
see it
out
all the time.
of, I'm going to say the scientific community. And
Not
what
so
blows
scientific.
me, yeah. But what blows me away is, okay, so we have this one cardboard box of parts, and we have this vast array of mythology coming from cultures around the world, and the depth and breadth and beauty of it. And they don't want to even look at it. They don't even want to touch the possibility that maybe there could be some truth to it. Maybe. Because they're so freaking brainwashed.
Well, they are so brainwashed, and the purpose of that is to brainwash society as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just completely to deny. I think that it's geared to deny any gods, big G or little g, because that's the way that people have been teaching, and the evolution of our educational system, and it just seems to be flowing in that manner. And if you are a devout practicing member of really any faith, then you're a radical. You're not stable. And that narrative has been in place for at least 25 years that I'm aware of, since I started paying attention to it closely. It just really is mind-boggling.
But that's really kind of a big change, where people who were it are now being ostracized for what they think and what they feel and what they believe. So I find that that's been a very interesting turn of events. But it seems like, especially when you talk about ancient mysteries, archaeology, that area, they're still trying to fit it into the narrative that society began, about 6,000 years ago with the rise of the Sumerians. But people like Michael Cremo keep bringing to the forefront, these out of place artifacts. Or we have sites like Göbekli Tepe that surely shouldn't be there.
Exactly.
I think one of my favorites is Sacsayhuaman in South America. And if anybody's not familiar with that name, I'm sure they've seen the images where it's that giant wall that's in Peru that's made up of a bunch of blocks that
the H blocks
are like carved. They're like intricately carved, like puzzle pieces, and you can't quite figure out how the heck they did it. Especially they're giant size, and they go up 2 and 3 courses. And you can't put a piece of paper in between the stones. They're just perfect.
I love that. My husband's a machinist, and that blows him away.
And, and so the conclusion about them is that they were, built in like 1500 AD by the Inca. That's, if you read in books, that's kind of the general consensus. But then individuals that actually interacted with the Inca At that